The star was dying, and everyone on Valar Prime knew it. Taemin stood at the observation window of the High Council chamber, watching the sky turn strange colors. The sun that had warmed his world for thousands of generations now pulsed with angry red light. Sometimes it flickered. Sometimes it grew so bright that people had to stay indoors for hours. The scientists said they had maybe 6 months, maybe less. He was the lead diplomat of the Valar Council, which meant he was supposed to find solutions to impossible problems. But there was no solution to a dying star, not one they could afford anyway, not one that would work in time. Behind him, the council members argued. They had been arguing for weeks now. Some wanted to build underground cities. Others wanted to pour all their resources into a fleet of generation ships that might save a fraction of their population. A few simply sat in silence, accepting that their civilization was ending. Taemin pressed his hand against the cool glass. 4 billion people lived on Valar Prime. 4 billion lives that would end when the star finally collapsed. He had spent his entire career negotiating treaties and trade agreements with other civilizations across the galaxy. He had always been good at finding common ground, at making deals that benefited everyone. But none of those civilizations were offering to help now. The door to the chamber opened and Hana walked in. She was the chief scientist, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried her datapad. Taemin had known her for 20 years. He had never seen her look so defeated. "The latest readings," she said quietly, handing him the pad. "The star's decay is accelerating. We have 4 months now, maybe 3.5. The arguing behind them stopped. Everyone had heard. 4 months, repeated Council Member Daesung. He was old, had served on the council for 40 years. Not enough time to build anything. Not enough time to evacuate even 1/10 of our people. We could focus on saving our best and brightest, suggested another council member. Scientists, artists, historians. Preserve our culture at least. And abandon everyone else to die? Taemin turned from the window. Is that who we are? It's better than saving no one at all. The argument started again. Taemin closed his eyes and tried to think. There had to be something, some option they hadn't considered. But they had considered everything. They had run every simulation, explored every possibility. The math was simple and cruel. They didn't have enough time or resources to save themselves. A young voice spoke up from the corner. What if we asked for help? Everyone turned to look at Jiwon. She was a communications officer, barely 30 years old, and she rarely spoke in council meetings. Now she stood there with her chin raised, meeting their stares. We did ask, Hana said, not unkindly. We sent notices to the Korthi Empire, the Selenium Collective, the Drazen Federation, all the major powers. They all refused. I know, Jiwon said. But we only sent official diplomatic requests. What if we sent out a real distress call? Not to specific governments, but to everyone? The whole galaxy? A broadcast? Taemin considered it. You mean an open emergency signal? Yes, tell them what's happening. Show them we're dying. Ask anyone who can help to please come. Jiwon's voice grew stronger. We have nothing to lose. Council member Daesung laughed bitterly. Child, the galaxy doesn't work that way. Civilizations help their allies, their trade partners, their neighbors. No one helps strangers. No one risks their own resources for a dying world they have no connection to. Maybe, Jiwon said. But what if someone does? What if there's one civilization out there that thinks differently? The council chamber fell silent. Taemin looked at each member's face. He saw exhaustion, despair, and resignation. They had already given up. Maybe they were right. Maybe it was foolish to hope. But they were going to die anyway. Why not be foolish? Draft the message, he said to Jiwon. Send it everywhere. Every frequency, every known space lane, every corner of the mapped galaxy. Tell them who we are and what we need. 3 days later, the broadcast went out. Jiwon had worked with Hana to create something more than just a distress call. They included images of Valar Prime, of their cities and people. They included their history, their culture, their art. They explained their situation clearly. The dying star, the timeline, the impossible math of evacuation. They asked for anything. Evacuation ships, terraform technology, temporary shelter on another world. Anything at all. They sent the message to every civilization they knew of, and to all the empty space between. Maybe someone they didn't know about would hear. Maybe someone would care. The days passed slowly after that. Taemin found himself checking the communications center constantly. though he knew Jiwon would tell him immediately if any response came. She was there almost constantly now, monitoring every channel, hoping. Responses did come eventually. The Korthi Empire sent a formal message expressing sympathy, but explaining that they had no ships to spare. The Selenium Collective sent nothing at all. A few smaller civilizations sent messages of regret. One even sent prayers to Valar gods, but no one sent help. No one offered ships or shelter or solutions. 2 months after the broadcast, riots started in the lower cities. People were scared and angry. They knew they were going to die and they wanted someone to blame. The council, the scientists, anyone. Taemin couldn't blame them. He felt the same anger himself sometimes late at night when he couldn't sleep. He had spent his life believing the galaxy was a place of cooperation and mutual benefit. That civilizations helped each other because it was the smart thing to do, the right thing to do. Now he understood the truth. The galaxy was full of civilizations that cared only about themselves. Help only came when there was something to gain. The Valar had nothing to offer, so no one would help them die with dignity, let alone live. 3 months after the broadcast, Taemin authorized the council to begin preparing memorial records. If their civilization was going to end, at least they could leave behind proof that they had existed, that they had mattered. Future archaeologists might find Valar Prime's ruins someday and wonder who had lived here. He was in his office reviewing the memorial plans when Jiwon burst through the door. Her eyes were wide. She was breathing hard like she had been running. In her hand she held a data pad and it was shaking. "They answered," she gasped. Someone answered. Taemin stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Who, the Korthi? The Drazen?" "No." Jiwon's voice was strange, confused and hopeful at the same time. "Earth. A planet called Earth. I've never even heard of them. They're barely in our databases. But they're coming." She handed him the pad. Taemin read the message once, then again, not quite believing it. "We received your distress call. We're coming to help. Hold on. Earth fleet is on the way." That was all it said. No negotiations, no demands, no questions about payment or benefit. Just a promise. Taemin looked at the attached data. Earth was a small planet in a distant system. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. By galactic standards, they were nobody, a young civilization that most of the galaxy barely noticed. But they had heard, and they were coming. For the first time in months, Taemin felt something he had almost forgotten. It took him a moment to recognize the feeling. It was hope. The human ships appeared at the edge of the Valar system exactly 12 days after their message. Taemin watched them arrive on the long-range sensors. He had expected maybe 1 or 2 vessels. A token gesture of help from a small civilization that couldn't really do much. Instead, he counted 47 ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They weren't impressive ships, not by galactic standards. The Valar had vessels twice their size with shields and weapons far more advanced. These human ships looked practical, almost plain, like tools rather than symbols of power. But there were so many of them, and they had crossed half the galaxy to get here. "They're hailing us," Jiwon said from her console. Her voice was excited. "Audio and visual. Put it through." The main screen flickered and a human face appeared. He was male with dark hair and tired eyes. He wore a blue uniform that looked military, but wasn't decorated with the endless medals and insignias that most military leaders loved to display. "This is Captain Minho of the Earth vessel Horizon's Dawn. We're here to help with your evacuation. Permission to enter orbit and begin assessment operations?" Taemin blinked. Assessment operations. They were already talking about the practical work, not wasting time on diplomatic formalities or negotiations. "Permission granted," he said. "Captain Minho, I'm Taemin, lead diplomat of the Valar Council. We're grateful you came, but I must ask, why? What does Earth want in return?" There was a pause. Captain Minho looked confused by the question. "In return? You sent a distress call. People were dying, we came. That's all." "But your government?" "Our government authorized us to use whatever resources necessary. They sent every ship that could make the journey." Minho leaned forward slightly. "Look, we can discuss politics later if you want. Right now, we need to understand your situation better. How many people need evacuation? What's your timeline? What resources do you have available?" Hana stepped forward next to Taemin. 4 billion people. 3 months until the star's final collapse, maybe less. and we have almost no resources left. We spend everything trying to save our world." Another figure appeared on the screen next to Minho, a woman with sharp eyes and hands that moved constantly, already tapping on a data pad. "I'm Dr. Yuna, Chief Engineer. Send us all your star data and population distribution maps. We'll start running scenarios." The transmission ended. Within an hour, human ships were in orbit. Within 2 hours, human teams were on the surface of Valar Prime, setting up equipment and taking readings. They moved with incredible speed, like they had been planning this for months instead of days. Taemin met the human delegation in person that evening. Captain Minho looked even more tired up close. Dr. Yuna's hands never stopped moving, either typing on her pad or sketching diagrams in the air as she talked. There were a dozen other humans with them, all wearing the same practical uniforms, all looking exhausted. "How long was your journey?" Taemin asked as they walked through the council building. 17 days at maximum speed," Minho said. "We pushed the engines hard. Dr. Yuna wasn't happy about it, but we didn't want to waste time." 17 days. Hana did the math in her head. "That's dangerous. Most species won't push their ships that hard except in combat." "People were dying," Yuna said simply, as if that explained everything. "Ships can be repaired." They reached the council chamber where the full council waited. Taemin had told them to be prepared for anything. Some council members still didn't believe the humans would really help. Others thought it must be a trick that Earth wanted something they weren't saying. But the humans just got to work. Dr. Yuna pulled up holographic displays showing the Valar star's decay patterns. "You were right about the timeline. 3 months, maybe a bit less. The star's core is collapsing faster than normal. When it goes, it'll take the entire inner system with it." "We know," Daesung said. "What we need is ships. Can Earth provide evacuation vessels?" Minho and Yuna exchanged a look. It was Minho who spoke. "We brought everything we have. 47 ships, most of them military or government vessels. They can carry about 300 million people per trip." The council chamber went silent. 300 million per trip. That was impressive, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. "How many trips can you make?" Taemin asked quietly. "In 3 months? With travel time, loading, unloading," Yuna calculated quickly. "Maybe 4 trips. 5 if we're lucky and nothing breaks down. That's about 1.5 billion people." "Out of 4 billion, Hana said. The hope that had been building died in her voice. "It's not enough." "No," Minho agreed. "Not with what we brought. But we're not done. We sent word back to Earth before we arrived. They're mobilizing everything. Civilian ships, cargo haulers, passenger liners, private vessels. Anything that can carry people through space. They should arrive in waves over the next few weeks." "Everything?" Council member Daesung stared at him. "You mean your entire civilian fleet? Your whole space transportation network?" "Yes. But that will leave Earth defenseless. If another civilization wanted to attack you, invade your system, then we'll deal with that if it happens," Minho said. "Right now you need help. That matters more." Taemin felt something twist in his chest. He had spent months sending messages to empires that had millions of ships, asking for just a few dozen to help. They had all refused, citing security concerns or resource allocation or political complications. Now this tiny civilization was risking everything. "Why?" The word came out before he could stop it. "Captain Minho, please. I need to understand. Earth barely knows us. We have no alliance, no trade agreements, no history together. Your people gain nothing from this. Why would you risk so much?" Minho was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Do you know what our planet was like 100 years ago? We were divided. Hundreds of nations all fighting over resources and land and old grudges. We nearly destroyed ourselves. Multiple times." He looked around the council chamber, meeting each member's eyes. "We survived because some people chose to help even when it didn't benefit them. Scientists who shared discoveries instead of hoarding them. Doctors who treated enemies. Soldiers who protected civilians from their own governments. Regular people who hid refugees in their homes, who shared food during famines, who rebuilt destroyed cities." "That's different," Daesung protested. "That was your own species." "Is it different?" Yuna spoke up. "You sent a distress call that said, 'Help us, we're dying.' We heard it. We can help. What else matters?" She pulled up a new holographic display. "Now we have work to do. Here's what we're proposing. We'll divide your population into priority groups based on your largest population centers. We'll set up embarkation points at each major city. The first wave of human ships will start loading in 2 days while my teams finish the safety checks. For the next 3 hours, the humans presented their plan. It was detailed, practical, and ambitious. They had thought of everything from medical support to food supplies to keeping families together during the evacuation. They worked like people who had done this before, even though Tae-min knew they hadn't. When the meeting finally ended, Tae-min walked Minho and Yuna back to their shuttle. The Valar night was strange now, with the dying star painting the sky in colors that shouldn't exist. Your people are going to work all night, aren't they? Tae-min asked. Minho nodded. We'll sleep in shifts. There's too much to do. Captain, I still don't understand you. What's to understand? You needed help, we came. Tomorrow we start saving your people. Minho smiled, and it was the first time Tae-min had seen him smile. That's what people should do. Help each other. The fact that the rest of the galaxy doesn't do it just means they're missing something important. The shuttle lifted off, heading back to the horizon's dawn in orbit. Tae-min stood there watching it go, Hana beside him. They're going to try to save all of us, she said quietly. 4 billion people. They really think they can do it. I know. That's impossible. I know. But they're going to try anyway. Tae-min nodded. For the first time, he let himself really believe it. These strange humans from a world the galaxy barely noticed. They had heard a cry for help from across space. And they had answered with everything they had. The evacuation would start in 2 days. Either it would work, or they would all die trying. But they wouldn't die alone. Selman had taught children for 30 years. She knew how to stay calm when everyone around her was panicking. But standing in the embarkation center with 3,000 other Valar, watching the human ships descend through the red-tinted sky, she felt her hands shake. Everyone stay in your assigned groups, a human voice called out in surprisingly good Valar. Families will not be separated. I repeat, families will stay together. The human who spoke was young, maybe 25 in Earth years. He wore a yellow vest over his uniform and carried a datapad that seemed to be showing him everything at once. He moved through the crowd with quick efficiency, checking names, answering questions, never stopping. You're Soman? He asked, reaching her group. Teacher? 38 children with you? Yes. Will we all fit on one ship? You'll fit. Ship 7, Bay 3. The kids go first, you board last to keep count. Food and water stations are marked inside. Medical team on every deck. He was already moving to the next group. Stay with your children. Don't worry. We've got you. His name tag said Doyun. He was a supply coordinator, whatever that meant. Soman watched him work the crowd and realized he was doing the impossible. He was making order out of chaos. The first ships had arrived 3 days ago. Since then, humans had been everywhere. They worked through the night, slept in their ships or not at all, and somehow kept everything moving. The Valar had expected military precision. Instead, they got something else. Organized chaos that somehow worked. Attention Bay 3, a speaker crackled. Begin boarding. Families with young children first. Somin gathered her students. They were scared. Some were crying. She led them toward the massive ship that had settled onto the landing pad. It was bigger up close and it hummed with power. The boarding ramp was wide enough for 20 people to walk side by side. Inside, human crew members waited. One woman knelt down to talk to a Valar child who was crying. Hey, it's okay. We're going somewhere safe. Want to see the windows? You can watch the stars. The child sniffled and nodded. The human took her hand and led her deeper into the ship. Other humans were doing the same, guiding families carrying luggage, helping elderly Valar who struggled with the ramp. It took 2 hours to load everyone. Soman was the last aboard, counting heads one final time. 38 children, all present. The ship lifted off so smoothly she barely felt it. Through the windows, she watched Valar Prime fall away. The city grew smaller. The angry red sun filled half the sky, pulsing with sick light. They were leaving. Her world, her home, everything she had ever known. Gone. A human crew member appeared beside her. Female with kind eyes. First time in space? Yes, it gets easier. The fear, I mean. You'll see. The human paused. I'm Minji. I'll be checking on your group during the flight. If anyone needs anything, medical help, food, whatever, you tell me. How long to reach safety? 4 days to the relay point. Then you transfer to a bigger ship that'll take you to temporary housing. Minji smiled. You're going to be okay. All of you. Salman wanted to believe her. She looked around the cargo bay that had been converted to passenger space. Hundreds of Valar sat on benches or floors holding children clutching belongings. Human crew members moved among them constantly, offering water, blankets, reassurance. "Why are you doing this?" Salman asked. "Your people. Why help us?" Minji thought about it. "Because you needed help, and because nobody else would." She said it like it was simple, like there was no other answer. Over the next 4 days, Salman watched the humans work. They never stopped. Crew members pulled double shifts. When one human finally collapsed from exhaustion, 2 others carried him to a bunk and took over his duties without being asked. They shared their own food rations when supplies ran low. They sang songs to calm frightened Valar children in languages nobody understood but somehow still helped. At the relay point, the transfer happened smoothly. Larger ships waited there, civilian vessels from Earth that had been converted to carry refugees. Salman and her students moved to a passenger liner that had once carried tourists. Now it carried 3,000 Valar to safety. The evacuation continued for weeks. More human ships arrived in waves. Not just military vessels now, but cargo haulers with their holds converted to passenger space. Luxury yachts carrying 50 people each. Even small private ships owned by humans who had volunteered to help, making the long journey to Valar Prime and back multiple times. Doyen coordinated all of it somehow. Salman saw him every time her group came back for another load of evacuees. He never seemed to sleep. His datapad never left his hand. He directed ships to landing zones, managed supply distribution, solved problems that shouldn't have been solvable. "How do you do it?" she asked him during one loading operation. "The logistics. There's too much to track." He laughed, and it sounded slightly delirious. "You know what I did before this? I organized charity runs, 5-kilometer races to raise money for hospitals. This is just bigger." He took a long drink from a canteen. "Way bigger. But the principle is the same. Figure out what needs to happen. Find people to do it and adjust when things go wrong. Things always go wrong. You make it sound easy. It's not easy. It's just necessary." He checked his pad. "Okay, Ship 12 is having engine trouble. Ship 19 will take their load. Bay 7 needs more medical supplies. And the food shipment for tomorrow is delayed. So we're doubling up today's rations and asking people to go light on breakfast." He ran off before she could respond, already talking into his communicator, fixing the next problem. News of the evacuation spread across the galaxy. Other civilizations watched, some with fascination, others with contempt. The Korthi Empire sent a message calling the humans foolish. The Drazen Federation published analysis papers about Earth's irrational resource allocation. Salman heard about it from a Valar who still had access to galactic news feeds. They were calling Earth stupid, naive, saying that humans would regret this, that they were bankrupting themselves for nothing. She thought about Doyen running on stimulants and willpower, about Minji checking on frightened children for the 100th time, about the human who had sat up all night helping a Valar elder who couldn't stop crying, just sitting there holding her hand, not speaking, just being present. Let the galaxy call them foolish. Salman had learned something in these weeks of evacuation. There were different kinds of intelligence. The Korthi were smart about power and conquest. The Drazen were smart about efficiency and profit. But the humans were smart about something else, something that mattered more. They were smart about being decent. 6 weeks into the evacuation, disaster struck. A solar flare erupted from the dying star, larger than predicted. It hit 3 human ships that were in the middle of loading operations. The ship's shields held, but their engines were damaged. Not destroyed, but hurt badly enough that they couldn't make the journey back to Earth. 200 million Valar still waited for evacuation. They had 11 days before the star's final collapse. Salman was at the embarkation center when the announcement came. The humans were working on repairs, but it would take time. Time they didn't have. Alternative plans were being made. She watched the humans' faces. They looked devastated, like they had failed, even though they had already saved billions. Doyen stood at the center control station, staring at his datapad, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked lost. "We can't get everyone out," she heard him say to another coordinator. His voice cracked. "We've been running the numbers all day. Even if we repair the ships, even if nothing else goes wrong, we can't get everyone." That night, Salman couldn't sleep. She walked through the temporary shelter where her group was staying, checking on her students. They were safe. They would live. But so many others wouldn't. She found Minji sitting outside looking up at the stars. The human woman wasn't crying, but her face was wet. "We should have come sooner," Minji whispered. "If we'd come a month earlier, maybe." "You came when you heard," Soman said, sitting beside her. "Nobody else even tried. It's not enough. We're going to leave people behind. But you saved billions. My students, me. We're alive because of you." Minji shook her head. "That's not how it works. You don't get credit for the ones you save when you couldn't save them all." Soman didn't know what to say to that, so she just sat there with the human woman, both of them staring at the stars, thinking about the people they couldn't save. The next morning, a message came through from one of the damaged ships. The captain's name was Hyun. He had a plan. It was risky, possibly suicidal, but it might work. Soman heard about it from Doyen, who looked like he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "They're going to overload their ship," he said. "Pack it beyond safety limits and make one more run. They say the ship won't survive the return journey, but they don't care. They'll get those last evacuees out. They'll die," Soman said.
"Yeah, they know. Can you stop them?"
Doyen shook his head. "They already voted. The whole crew. Unanimous. They're doing it." That's when Somin understood. These humans, they were all a little bit crazy. Crazy in the best possible way. Captain Hyun stood on the bridge of the Steadfast and watched the structural integrity warnings flash red across every screen. His ship was dying. They all knew it. The solar flare had damaged more than just the engines. The hull plating was compromised. The power couplings were failing. The navigation systems kept glitching. A proper repair would take weeks. They had days. Maybe. "Captain." His first officer, Yoonji, pulled up the latest cargo calculations. "If we remove all non-essential equipment and run the engines at minimum safety thresholds, we can carry 400,000 people. One trip." 400,000, Hyun repeated. He looked at the planet below them. Valor Prime hung in space like a wounded animal, its sun pulsing with violent light behind it. 200 million people down there. 400,000 they could save. It was something. It wasn't enough, but it was something. "What about the return journey?" asked the helmsman. Yoonji was quiet for a moment. "The ship won't make it. Not with that much weight, not with the damage we have. We'll get them to the relay point, but the Steadfast won't survive the strain." Nobody spoke. Hyun looked around his bridge. He had served with these people for 8 years. They had explored new systems together, mapped trade routes, once fought off pirates that had been terrorizing a shipping lane. They were good people, good crew. "Call a vote," he said quietly. "Captain, call a vote. Everyone aboard, full crew. They deserve to know what we're asking." It took an hour to gather everyone. The Steadfast carried a crew of 200. They assembled in the cargo bay, which was empty now except for them. Hyun stood on a crate so everyone could see him. "You all know the situation," he said. His voice echoed in the large space. "Our ship is badly damaged. We can make one more trip. We can save 400,000 people. But the ship won't survive the return journey. We'll get the evacuees to safety, but the Steadfast will break apart. We'll have time to evacuate ourselves to other ships, or we might not. I don't know." Silence. Then someone in the back called out, "What's the question, Captain?" "The question is, do we do it? Do we risk our lives for 400,000 strangers?" A young engineer near the front raised her hand. "With respect, sir, that's a stupid question. Of course we do it." Laughter. Nervous, but real. Hyun felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. "I need a formal vote. Everyone who wants to make this run, raise your hand." 200 hands went up. Every single one. No hesitation. Unji stood beside Hyun. She was crying quietly, but she was smiling too. "I'll start the preparations." They loaded the evacuees over 2 days. 400,000 Valor. All of them knowing this was the last ship out. The Steadfast groaned under the weight. Every sensor screamed warnings. The engineers worked miracles, just keeping the systems functional. Salman brought her last group of students aboard. She had made 7 trips back and forth, saving thousands of children. This was her final run. She helped settle the children in the cargo bay, where humans had set up makeshift sleeping areas. She found Captain Hyun on the bridge, staring at readouts that showed his ship was basically held together by hope and determination. Thank you, she said simply. He turned to look at her. He looked exhausted but peaceful. We're going to get your people out. All of you. At what cost? Does it matter? You sent a call for help. We answered. That's all there is to it. He smiled. Besides, the Steadfast was getting old anyway. This is a good way to go. Saving people. Better than rusting in a scrapyard. The ship lifted off from Valar Prime for the last time. The hull shook. Metal groaned. Alarms rang constantly. The engineers rerouted power, shut down non-essential systems, and basically held the ship together with prayers and repair tape. Taman watched from the command center on the surface. He had stayed behind to coordinate the final evacuations. Now he watched the Steadfast struggle into orbit, its engines burning far too hot, its structure bending under impossible strain. Hana stood beside him. They're overloading the ship. They'll never make it back. I know. We should stop them. We can't. They chose this. The Steadfast reached orbit and aligned for the jump to faster-than-light travel. That was the dangerous part. The ship had to hold together for the transition. If it broke apart during the jump, everyone aboard would die instantly. Steadfast to command, Hyun's voice came over the comm. We're jumping in 60 seconds. See you on the other side. Captain Hyun, you don't have to do this, Taemin said. We can find another way. No, you can't. We both know that. But it's okay. We're not being forced. We're choosing. A pause. Take care of our passengers. Tell them the Steadfast crew thought they were worth it. The countdown reached 0. The ship jumped, vanishing in a flash of distorted light. 4 days of silence. The longest 4 days of Taemin's life. He stayed at the command center, waiting for news. Other evacuations continued. The last ships left Valar Prime carrying the final civilians. Doyen coordinated everything with mechanical efficiency, but Taemin could see the strain in his face. They were all waiting to hear about the Steadfast. On the 4th day, the message came through. The Steadfast had reached the relay point. All 400,000 evacuees were safe. The ship had broken apart 3 hours after they arrived, its structure finally giving up after holding together far longer than it should have. The crew had survived, barely. They had evacuated to other ships just minutes before the Steadfast tore itself apart. 17 crew members were injured. None died, but the ship was gone. Taemin read the report and felt something break inside him. These humans had given everything. Their resources, their time, their safety, and now their ship. For strangers. For people they had never met. The final evacuation ships left Valar Prime 8 days before the star's collapse. The planet was empty now except for monitoring equipment and Taemin's small team. They would leave on the last shuttle, watching their world die from a safe distance. Taemin walked through the empty capital city one last time. The streets were silent. Buildings stood empty, their windows dark. It looked like everyone had just vanished. In a way they had. But they were alive. 4 billion Valar scattered across dozens of human ships traveling to a new home. Not one life lost in the evacuation. Not one person left behind. Because Earth had answered. Because humans had decided that some things mattered more than safety or profit or common sense. Hana found him standing in the central plaza. It's time. The shuttle is ready. They lifted off, rising through the red-stained atmosphere one last time. From orbit, they could see the sun clearly. It was pulsing faster now, its death throes accelerating. The science team gave it 6 more days. Maybe 7. The human fleet waited at the safe distance, all their ships arranged in formation. Taemin's shuttle docked with the horizon's dawn, where Captain Minho waited. Everyone's out, Minho said. 4 billion people, everyone. Because of you. Because we all chose to help. Minho looked at the view screen, showing Valar Prime. I'm sorry we couldn't. Save your world. You saved our people. That's everything. They watched together as the fleet prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel. 47 military ships, now damaged and exhausted. 130 civilian vessels converted from cargo haulers and passenger liners. 200 smaller ships, privately owned, crewed by volunteers. All of them carrying Valar refugees to a new home. Where are we going? Taemin asked. Mars. It's a planet in Earth's system. We recently terraformed it, made it capable of supporting life. We're giving it to your people. Giving it? Just giving it? You need a home. We have one available. What else would we do with it? Taemin couldn't speak. Hana pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. An entire planet, just given to them. No payment, no debt, no obligations. The fleet jumped. Behind them, Valar Prime hung in space, alone and dying. In 6 days it would be gone. But its people would live. They would build new cities, raise new children, create new art and science and culture, because humans had heard a cry for help and answered. Mars was red and cold and nothing like home. But it was alive, and so were the Valar people, so Somin tried to be grateful. She stood at the window of the temporary housing complex, watching the sun rise. This sun was yellow, stable, healthy. It wouldn't kill them. That was something. The sky was thin and the air was processed and everything smelled wrong, but her students were alive. That was everything. 5 years had passed since the evacuation. 5 years since Valar Prime died in a silent explosion that the galaxy had watched but not mourned. 5 years of building a new civilization on a world that humans had simply given them. Somin still couldn't understand it. She had spent those 5 years studying humanity, trying to make sense of the species that had saved her people. She taught her students about Earth history, about the wars and disasters and near extinctions that humans had survived. She learned their languages, read their literature, watched their films, and slowly she began to understand something fundamental about humans that other species had missed. They told themselves stories. Endless stories across all their cultures, about heroes who sacrificed for others, about strangers who helped strangers, about doing the right thing even when it cost everything. The gods who gave fire, the protectors who stood against darkness, the travelers who helped those in need. Every human culture had these stories, and humans didn't just tell them. They tried to live them. Today she was interviewing Captain Minho for her historical project. He had retired from active service and now lived in a small settlement at the edge of the Valar colony. She found him working in a garden, growing vegetables in Mars's processed soil. "Captain," she greeted him. "Just Minho now. I'm not a captain anymore." He stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "You're doing the memorial project? Recording survivor testimonies?" "Yes. With your permission, I'd like to ask you some questions." They sat on a bench outside his home. The red landscape stretched away in all directions, dotted with the buildings of New Valar City in the distance. 4 billion people now lived on Mars. They had built cities, schools, hospitals. They were surviving. "Why did Earth respond to our distress call?" Someone asked. "We studied your species extensively. Every model of rational behavior said you should have ignored us. Self-preservation, resource management, risk assessment. Everything said you should have stayed away." Minho was quiet for a while. "We're not always rational. Maybe that's our flaw. Maybe it's our strength. We hear someone asking for help and we have to respond. It's just how we're built. But why? The Korthi Empire has millions of ships. They wouldn't send one. The Selenium Collective has resources beyond measure. They sent prayers. Earth was barely a spacefaring civilization and you sent everything. The Korthi think about power. The Selenium think about efficiency. We think about people." He looked at her directly. "You were people who needed help." That was enough. Somin pulled up her datapad. "I found something in my research. Humans are the only species in the galaxy that has universal myths about altruistic sacrifice. Every single human culture across your entire planet tells stories about individuals who gave everything for strangers. Other species have stories about survival, about cunning, about strength. But you tell stories about compassion. Never thought about it that way. And then you live those stories. When we sent our distress call, you didn't calculate profit or strategic advantage. You just came, because that's what the heroes in your stories would do." Minho smiled slightly. "Maybe. Or maybe we just hate watching people suffer when we can stop it." The interview continued for another hour. Somin asked about the evacuation, about the decisions made, about the cost. Minho answered everything honestly, including the parts that hurt. The crew members who had permanent injuries from overwork, the ships that were damaged beyond repair, the economic impact on Earth that took years to recover from. "Do you regret it?" Somin asked finally. "No, never. We saved 4 billion people. How could I regret that?" After the interview, Somin walked back to New Valar City. The streets were busy with Valar going about their lives, building businesses, raising families, creating art, living. She passed a school where Valar children played with human children. The humans were the children of the evacuees' crew members who had stayed on Mars to help with the settlement. The children ran together, laughing, playing games that mixed Valor and human traditions. In the city center, she found Doyon. He hadn't gone back to Earth either. He had stayed to help coordinate the settlement construction. Using the same impossible logistics skills that had saved billions, now he ran the colony's supply distribution network. Still making the impossible work? She asked him. He grinned, looking 10 years older than he should. Every day, though it's easier now. No dying stars to race against. They walked together through the market district. Valar merchants sold goods alongside human traders. The species that had been saved and the species that had saved them living side by side. The galaxy is watching, you know, Doyon said. News of what happened here spread everywhere. Some think we're fools, but others are paying attention. He was right. Soman had been monitoring galactic communications. 3 smaller civilizations facing their own crises had sent out distress calls in the past year. And others had responded. Slowly, reluctantly, but they had responded. The Korthi Empire, shamed by comparison, had sent aid to one world. The Selenium Collective had opened their borders to refugees from another. Earth had set a precedent, not through force or diplomacy, but through example. That evening, Somin attended a ceremony at the Memorial Park. 5 years after the evacuation, they were unveiling a monument, a wall with the names of every human who had participated in the rescue. 200,000 names, including the crew of the Steadfast, listed first. Taman gave a speech. He was the governor of the Valar colony now, elected by popular vote. He spoke about gratitude, about friendship, about the debt that could never be repaid. But when Captain Hune stepped up to speak, he said something different. He had survived the Steadfast destruction and now taught engineering at the new university. We don't want repayment, he said simply. We don't want debt or obligation. We did what anyone should do. We helped. That's all. He paused. But if you want to honor us, then do this. When you hear someone calling for help, answer. Pass it forward. Make the galaxy a little more like what it should be. The crowd was silent. Then they began to applaud. Not just Valar, but humans too. The sound echoed across the park. 20 years later, Somin was old. Her students were adults now, many with children of their own. She taught at the university, sharing the history of the evacuation with new generations who hadn't lived through it. One day, an alert came through the Galactic Communications Network. A distress call from a distant world. A civilization called the Recon, facing a catastrophic asteroid impact. They needed help. Fast. The Valar government called an emergency session. Soman attended as a historical advisor. They had the technology now, ships they had built with human help. They had the resources, but responding would be expensive, risky. We should send aid, said Counselor Nari. She was young, born on Mars, a child of the evacuation. We have the capability. But the Recon are strangers, argued an older counselor. We have no alliance with them, no strategic interest. They need help. That should be enough. The debate continued for hours. Soman listened, watching the younger generation argue passionately for intervention. They had grown up hearing stories about the evacuation, about humans who crossed the galaxy to save strangers. Finally, Taman, still serving as governor, called for a vote. The measure passed overwhelmingly. The Valar would send aid, ships, supplies, personnel, everything they could spare. Earth offered to help too. Of course they did. And so did 3 other civilizations. The galaxy was learning slowly that there was another way to exist. Not every species for themselves, but something different, something better. 30 years after the evacuation, Soman was in her classroom when the news came. Her student, a young Valar woman named Nari, burst in with her datapad. Professor, there's another distress call. From the Andar system. Multiple sources. Soman pulled up the information. The Andar were facing a plague, something their medical technology couldn't handle. They were asking for help. Before she could finish reading, more news came through. 5 civilizations had already responded. They were sending medical teams, supplies, research support. No negotiations. No demands for payment, just help. Nari looked at Soman with shining eyes. It's working. What Earth started, it's spreading. That night, Soman wrote the final chapter of her historical documentation. The project had taken 30 years, thousands of interviews, analysis of countless data points. She had tried to understand why Earth had answered when no one else would. Her conclusion was simple. Humans had something other species lacked or had forgotten. They believed that helping others was its own reason. They told stories about it, taught it to their children, and lived it even when it cost them everything. And because they had lived it, others were learning to live it too. The galaxy was changing. Not quickly, not everywhere, but changing. 40 years after the evacuation, Captain June stood on the bridge of his ship. He was Valor, born on Mars,